Welcome back to our live coverage of the UN Climate Talks. Delighted to have been joined by Alden Meyer of the Union of Concerned Scientists. Our viewers have actually just watched the Cannes press conference streamed live, so they'll have some insights. But I wanted to ask you, what are the implications if Japan's position doesn't change? We've just asked Rahman, and he said crash. That was his answer. And what does that mean for these talks?
Well, I think it depends what you mean by Japan's position. I don't think anyone expects Japan is going to reverse its statement that at the present time it doesn't intend to be part of the Kyoto Protocol second commitment period. That's different from Japan preventing the negotiations on the KP from moving forward. I think Rahman's right that if Japan, Russia, and others block the negotiations from moving forward and say they will not be part of those negotiations, that could cause a crash scenario. If, on the other hand, they find a way to let those negotiations go forward without implying that Japan and Russia have committed to be part of the second commitment period, you live to fight another day, and we can continue to work on Japan and Russia to encourage them to stay in Kyoto between now and Durban.
And we've spoken a lot to our viewers this week about the two big tracks to the talks, the long-term cooperative action track and the Kyoto Protocol track. Why is it that they have to move together so slowly? Why can't we just kind of agree one and then the other?
Well, because in one track you have the Kyoto industrialized countries with the current regime of commitments. In the other track you have my country, the United States, that does not have that commitment, has made clear it's not going to be part of Kyoto. And you've got also negotiations about what we can expect on a voluntary basis at this point from the major emerging economies that are responsible for a growing share of emissions. So to have a strategy that deals with the scientific urgency and really lifts the ambition, our collective global ambition of cutting emissions, you have to deal with both sides of the house. You have to have progress on Kyoto in terms of deepening the reduction targets for the countries that have them now, and you have to have a process under the convention that has the U.S. committing to do something comparable to the Kyoto industrialized countries and also the major emerging economies like China, India, Brazil, and others, putting forward the pledges they have, being willing to stand behind those pledges, and hopefully over time joining other countries and increasing the collective ambition of what we're doing. You have to have very broad coverage and participation in this problem if you're going to meaningfully address it. And right now, that means moving forward under both tracks. The politics of this are that if you don't have movement in one track, someone's going to block you in the other track. So if you don't have progress towards the second commitment period under Kyoto, the developing countries are going to say they're not willing to move forward on recognizing the pledges they've made in the convention track and standing behind them. If you don't have the developing countries being willing to stand behind the pledges they've made during and since Copenhagen and some transparency about how well they're doing in meeting them, the U.S. has made clear it's going to block a whole range of other decisions. So everything's connected here, and it would be sort of a multiple car crash scenario here where you could have the Kyoto peeling off of Japan and Russia under Kyoto, affecting the developing country behavior in the LCA track, that in turn affecting the U.S. behavior on all the decisions on RED and adaptation and technology, and at the end of the day come out of here with nothing meaningful to show for it. That would be the worst case outcome. I'm hoping we can avoid that. I still think we can.
And what are the implications for the UN process if we have that outcome?
Well, I think the implications are that there would be a severe blow to the credibility of this process for a period of time. You would need to go back and rebuild the political conditions in some of the key countries for there to be a more constructive engagement in this process down the road. That might be something that would not be done by Durban. It might take several years to change those dynamics and for people to really give another shot at the UN process as the forum for negotiation. But I don't think that means that the action moves somewhere else. It doesn't move to the G20 process or the Major Economies Forum, because wherever the major emitting countries are going to go, they're going to take their politics with them. So the U.S.-China standoff is going to be just the same, and it has been just the same in the G20 as it's been here. If we can't resolve those underlying political dynamics, we're not going to make progress in any forum, and I think that's the lesson we're learning here.
And despite the Mexican presidency's claim that these talks are going to finish at 6 o'clock sharp this evening, we've heard several people say that we can expect them to go well into tomorrow. Is there a sense of what's moved over the course of these last 2 weeks? Where has the situation changed?
Well, from what I hear, and I won't know until I've seen the text and heard the president's statement in the plenary when she convenes it, they are making progress behind the scenes on some fronts, on figuring out how to anchor the mitigation pledges by both industrialized and developing countries in the text, making progress on how to monitor and verify and report on those emissions. I think what I understand, the deforestation and technology decisions are basically wrapped up and ready to go to ministers, and we're hearing good things on the capacity building side as well. Finance is a little trickier. There's still some big food fights there, particularly about the process for moving forward between Cancun and Durban to operationalize the new climate fund. That's still a fight. And this issue of legal form, what kind of legal decisions are we looking towards as a result of this process over the next year or two? There are still some big divisions on that. So it's not all agreed to, but that's what they're working on with ministers behind the scenes. My understanding is they're trying to get as much of that done as they can before they bring back the new text and the agreement to the plenary for countries to look at. But there may still be some unresolved issues to be worked out over the course of the night when they bring back that text.
I just want to pick up on two of those issues finally. The legal form, you said it still isn't clear and parties don't necessarily know what they're working towards. That was one of the big kind of reasons for the collapse in Copenhagen, was the impression that we got. If that's not sorted soon, can we expect any real progress? And secondly, speaking to Salim Al-Hook yesterday, he said he felt that the climate fund was going to be our positive headline to come out of these talks. Is that something you'd agree with?
Sure. Well, I think on the legal form, you've got well-known diametrically opposed positions of major countries or groups of countries. You've got the small island states that want to see Kyoto continued and another legal instrument to parallel it for the U.S. and over time major emerging economies. You've got Japan and Russia which want to replace Kyoto with a single new legal treaty. You've got some that would like to see Kyoto continue and then only have decisions in the convention track, and I would say China and India are probably in that camp, and maybe the U.S. So these are not common positions. They're very deeply held. They have implications politically and economically. You're not going to work out those differences here. What you can do is hopefully make a move forward from the language we had in Copenhagen, which is that the point of the LCA exercise is just an agreed outcome, to maybe it's a legally binding outcome without prejudice to whether that means a new legal instrument or protocol or just COP decisions. That would be some progress. It wouldn't resolve the food fight, but it would at least increase the certainty that what we're talking about is something that could be called legally binding. On the fund, I mean, I think there still is good prospect they will create the fund here. There's a question about what the process will be going forward to actually turn that fund into something that's up and running and has money in it and has a board of directors and can make decisions about how to allocate those resources. Those all will remain to be addressed between here and Durban. So if there's not more progress in the next year and all you do is establish a fund, you'd basically end up with an empty shell and no money and no impact on people's lives and no assistance to developing countries. I think there's good faith on that, and they want to try to get a decision out of here that launches a process that concludes by Durban. But as I've said, I haven't heard that is yet resolved among ministers.
Okay. And just an insight from your perspective in the US, if this process kind of doesn't move forward in some kind of tangible sense here, if Japan Japan's statements on the Kyoto Protocol hold things back, what are the implications for domestic politics in the US? Are people going to be leaping on this and shouting that the UN process is shattered, or is it going to motivate some kind of action in some way? What can we expect out of US domestic politics?
Well, I mean, one thing I think you can be sure of is that those in the Republican Party and industry and the skeptics community who don't want to see US action will seize on a negative outcome out of Cancun and try to use that to say, look, the rest of the world isn't serious, we told you so the U.S. shouldn't do anything either. And they will use that to try to go after the President's ability to use the Environmental Protection Agency authority under the Supreme Court decision to help move towards the 17% reduction commitment. I think in some ways it will redouble efforts of many groups at the state level and locally to try to build more activism and progress there, to say that part of the reason we had a breakdown here, if we do have a breakdown, was because of the weakened political position the U.S. was in. And so we've got to stick to our knitting at home and turn around the politics at home and get more states to join California, the Northeast, some of the Midwestern states in moving forward on climate energy policy. We've got to change the politics within the Republican Party. We've got to make this an issue that resonates powerfully in the 2012 elections. There are already people doing that and planning to ramp up their activities there, and I think that would reinforce that to say, okay, well, now, it's not likely we're going to get much out of the international process over the next couple of years. We've really got to focus our efforts at home and change the politics in the U.S. So one is very negative, one could be positive. But I think on balance it would be more negative, because I think you would definitely see the opponents of action trying to use this as another excuse for the U.S. to do nothing.
Okay, Alden, thanks very much for joining me. Perhaps we'll see you later in the early hours of the morning.
Probably well into tomorrow.
Cheers, Alden.
All right,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.